Okay, I'm going to start playing this tape from Auntie Janie interviewing Uncle Harry. Hopefully it'll come out okay.
Third? Sorry.
Second.
Second. 1995, and I'm interviewing Harry Lacover at his home in beautiful Beverly Hills, downtown Beverly Hills. No address. He doesn't want to be bothered. And what I want to find out from him is about where we used to live in Warsaw, because we want to plan our trip. And I understand the most of the street was gutted during the war. So I'm going to have him tell you in his own words so that we can plan our trip and then go along the path that he tells us to do. Okay. Now, I want to know, you said something the other time that where the house was, that was ruined, and then there was a little old temple.
No, I think you don't remember exactly what I told you, you know.
That's why I'm tape recording. Right.
We lived at mid-Warsaw on a street called Ulica Twarda.
How do you spell it?
Number 14. It was a very big house with an inner court, encircled by 4 high-rise apartment buildings. Needless to say, all of this was destroyed. Warsaw is not even but a skeleton, you know. All you have is street signs that resemble the names of streets used to be before the war. Everything else, 100%, was destroyed and rebuilt in a Mickey Mouse fashion. I once was curious enough to find out whether any buildings remained, and I did some research and found out there were all of Warsaw, which was a city of about 1 million people, a third of whom were Jewish, was completely destroyed. There were 3 buildings, a couple of hotels, one luxury hotel, the Bristol, and the other one, the Europejski Hotel, and there was another one in the mid-city, which I don't remember. Now, as I remember, they were luxury hotels. When I looked at them now, they were nothing but hovels. I understand they're trying to rebuild them. To go back to the street where we were born, in Florida, number 14, about 3 doors down, there was a famous Warsaw synagogue, which was called Norzik's. And very, very beautiful, very famous cantors. Some of them, one cantor by the name of Hirsch was hired away to go to New York, and that was the time of Rosenblatt and the other big cantors. And that was number 6. And that was sort of the pivotal, spiritual part of that street, you know. Now it's changed. There were some ruins left of the synagogue, which was called Norzik's. And I did find a couple of old people barely subsisting on government pay, waiting for the end. I did find on a subsequent visit that the government undertook some repairs to restore the synagogue. It was really a very, very most beautiful synagogue. However, next to the synagogue, the Polish government erected a Yiddish theater. The Kaminskis were the founder of the Kaminsky Theater in Poland. Originally they were from Romania, and they were the founders of the Yiddish theater in Warsaw, because they were in a different part of the city. This time the government rebuilt it right next to a Noshik synagogue. It is a very nice building with all the latest equipment, and surprisingly enough, it's all performed in Yiddish. We're very, very anxious to see if the play that was on the night we went to see it was based on the Jewish life and the old-fashioned Yiddish shtetl, with all the weddings and bar mitzvahs and dancing and dialogue and whatnot, you know. And going in there, I was looking for Jews all over Warsaw. I couldn't find any. I figured, well, there's one place that I would surely find some Jewish people. And as a matter of fact, I spoke to Milek, who's my Polish Jewish friend, journalist, and to get me some tickets, which he did. But we got there and walked in. It was kind of funny, you know, that everybody had hearing equipment on, translating. I said, well, if they're Jewish, how come they don't understand Yiddish? But you know, I figured, well, maybe they're too young to understand Yiddish. So Rhoda wanted to get one of those translating earphones, but was no use because she doesn't understand Yiddish and doesn't understand Polish. It would be money thrown out. You know. I figured since in Yiddish I wouldn't need any earphones. I did manage to speak, looking for some Jewish faces. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any, except the old ticket taker, you know, on the way in. Looked at me Jewish. I stopped him and says, is this a Yiddish, is this really a Yiddish theater? I says, of course. I said, everything's 100% in Yiddish. So we sat down and we listened. They had a real Yiddish play like Shalom Aleichem and all the Yiddish music, dancing, the bar mitzvahs, the Shabbos children, the Friday night candles, you know, and all done in pretty good Yiddish, you know. So during intermission, I went out and found my old ticket taker to get a little information. I said, how come they all speak such a good Yiddish language? He said, well, they're not all Jews. Half of them are Jews. If you want to get more information about the Jew, at the end of the performance, see Mr. Gottlieb, who's running this theater for the government. He, of course, is Jewish. I waited for him in the hallway when he came out. I said, tell me what's going on here. He says, the Polish government decided that they would build a monument of reminder of what was once the Yiddish shtetl, what was the Jewish population like, their celebrations, their joy, their simchas, and the show of what was once a Jewish community, which is, of course, non-existent now. I said, what about the composition of the cast? He says, half of them are Yiddish, are Jewish, and the other half, they learn how to pronounce the Jewish words, and it comes out pretty good Yiddish, you know. So I had an insight of what it was all about, and on the way out, I saw a couple of the old Jews sitting at Nozick Synagogue on a bench. And I went over to a couple of them and said, do you ever go to see the Yiddish theater? He says, with this no good Paskudniak who runs the Yiddish theater, why he's sold out the Jewish soul, just to curry favor with a Polish government. In any case, I went to see one more play, and I would say it was a reminder, it was a very vivid recollection of what once used to be the Jewish shtetl.
Okay, I also want to know about you said it was a shtetl, and how was it? I've only seen that like in the movies. Did it have gates around it or what?
It's a set, it was quite an extensive set.
No, I mean where we used to live.
Oh, well, we used to say it wasn't a shtetl, that was a big city.
Oh.
Warsaw was a city of 1 million people, over 1 million people, of whom 1/3, 330,000, were Jewish people. There were certain sections of the city that were almost 100% Jewish. All the textile industry, which was primarily in Jewish hands, was practically all Jewish. All the stores were Jewish. We had Jewish theaters, Jewish movies, Jewish writers, Jewish prophets. The city over more than 1/3 of 1 million people, A very active community politically, socially, scientifically, and the Jews felt quite at home. After all, they had been there in Poland for over 300 years, And our street was a large street. Toward our ulica was a little mix of a few Gentiles. Most of them were also Jewish people. However, there were very, very districts where there were no Jews at all. And there were many, many districts where there were no Gentiles at all. And where we lived, let's say, in our house where we lived, that's like a complex, I think of, that probably had about something like 120 or 130 dwellings, each on 3 stories, one side at 4 stories, the other at 3 stories. But I think there was only one Gentile family in the whole complex.
Harry, what year did you and your family leave? Did you leave Poland, and did you all leave together at the same time? The 6 children and plus the parents.
Well, not all, We left, I think we left something like 1925, Something like it.
But
Did you go directly to Canada?
We went directly to Montreal.
Didn't Paul left many years before? Or?
Yeah, he left a few years. He left a few years before. He had, naturally, he wanted to get the family out. He saw there was no real opportunity for the kids were growing up and yet to come. And he had a cousin in Montreal who left very, very early. His name was Wolofsky. And he founded a Yiddish theater, a Yiddish newspaper in the city of Montreal called Canada Adler. He wrote to them and he sent them the necessary papers. Got all that was necessary for him to come, and then after he went there, and then subsequently sent for the family.
And when you were Jewish children all going to school, like in mixed schools, Or did you go to Jewish schools or?
Polish or Yiddish?
The system was, they had a public school system. The public schools were Polish. They were supported by the government. They had no requirement that kids go to any school. Those who chose went to this public school. But most of them chose the Jewish schools where they taught both a little Polish by reading of that, and also they taught Jewish, And most of them went to Jewish schools. But of course there were a lot of wealthier people who sent their children to high schools that were Jewish but operated in Polish, and they were quite expensive, and those who could afford sent their kids to these private higher schools, eventually hoping that they would matriculate and get into Warsaw University. They were planning for a career. But getting into Warsaw University was no small feat, because they had this clause in numerous clauses. It was strictly proportioned. They took a certain number of Jewish students, and it was very, very, very difficult. Some of the Zionist leaders eventually did get, like Menachem Begin was a graduate of Warsaw University in law, and there were some other Jewish leaders who were from wealthier families and also very smart, and they got to Warsaw University. But we used to go to the ordinary schools, either a Polish high school or a Jewish school, and get some public school education, and then look for a job. That was the status of the average Jewish family in Warsaw.
Now, I remember Ma always saying that you used to get a job on the side tutoring other Polish kids. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little, maybe a little ahead of the pack, and I had no problem helping some of the kids, and earning a few groschen so I can buy myself some ice cream.
Well,
That first we went to Montreal and
okay, I'd like to know now. So if we go, of course, I want to visit that area of town. And then where else would you go, like in Warsaw? You say it's a big city with a lot of culture. So just wander around and pick up the climate of the city, or what?
It will be very, very difficult for me. It wasn't that difficult for me, because at least I had some recollection of some of the buildings, some of the names, and some of the numbers. Buildings I didn't remember at all. Now, for you to tell you that this was such and such street and we lived here and this was it, won't mean anything, because a name, if I tell you we lived in Kwartacz, won't mean anything, because it's a number, it's a dead number. There's no house that ever looked like it or resembles it. I might mention, which I didn't say before, there was one part of the city that the Germans saw fit not to destroy. This was the old town of Warsaw that was built in the middle century. And it's called Old Town, Stare Miasto. That was also destroyed, but somehow they had the old plans and old sketches of the old houses and they rebuilt that whole old town section to a T. And naturally, you know, that old to remember how it was, but it surely looks like the pictures, the paintings to the left, it looks like the real old town. That is downtown near the Royal Palace, and it still exists. It's still a mecca for tourists, old restaurants, and music halls, etc., etc.
Harry, where was your house in relation to the so-called Warsaw ghetto, where the Germans surrounded it and did all the butchering?
We did not. What was the Warsaw ghetto? Was a good part of the city, maybe a third. It was a very prosperous district where all the Jews congregated. They had all the Jewish businesses, mostly textile, wealthy people, and medium wealth, some workers. But that was 100% Jewish. There was one famous big apartment building, Miller. On this street, on Miller 18, this is where the Warsaw Uprising began. The people rose up against the incoming Germans. And of course, they were all slaughtered. You know. And that was the part that was a distinct large section. It was beautiful. It had beautiful restaurants and music at night, and a beautiful park, you know. Dancing and losing cabaret every night.
Okay, I'd like to know if you remember any part of, like Ma had one brother, I think. And do you remember ever seeing him? I know he went to England.
Ma had one brother, his name was David. He left Poland to escape getting into the army during World War I, went to England. I understand he had a barber shop, and she corresponded with him. That was the only brother, and I saw him but once. When we were on the boat going to Halifax, we stopped in the port of Liverpool, and he came to visit us on the boat. He lost his way, he finally made it, didn't have too much time, and he came down to the cabin and stayed there for about half an hour, and that was my only recollection of David.
Okay, and Pa had
This is the same street that Isaac Bashevis singer was born and lived, in the same complex. And they were a large family, you know. There were 3 or 4 brothers and 2 sisters. No, there were 2 sisters, 4 or 5 brothers. And when I remember, they were all grown, and most of them, not all, were married. And then one of them, one of the elder sisters, went to New York. She had some relatives. I don't know how she got to New York. And her other sister went to New York. Then her brother, Israel, went to New York. That was three. And one passed away in Warsaw, the eldest one. One was one of the top sign painters in Warsaw. Everybody wanted to have their sign, Gentile or Jewish shop, wanted their sign painted by, because he couldn't do all of them. He was a real artist. He and his family have remained in Warsaw, because we never heard anything about him. And that was the end. I looked at subsequently when we got to Montreal. I went to New York a couple of times and did meet the rest of the family there.
And what year was that?
I would say it was in the late 20s, early 30s.
Do you know the names of any of their parents? What their names?
Names of who?
Of the Ma's parents and the Pa's parents.
I have a slight recollection, but I wouldn't say I remember offhand of their parents.
All right, and so from there, you think the other city to go to is Krakow?
Well, Krakow, of course, this is where the Jews first invited to go to Poland, but King Kazimierz III invited the Jewish people to come to Poland. Krakow is a very old, ancient city. It was not destroyed. All the buildings and castles and roads still exist, and the names. And it is famous from one of the first universities in the world. I don't remember now the number. The Jagiellonian Institute is probably one of the first early universities founded. The one in Padua is the oldest one, in Warsaw, and Krakow. It still exists. It's still a teaching institution, and a place where scientists study and live. And it's a very, very interesting city. It had the very famous monastery of Częstochowa, which is a shrine in Polish history. And it's a very, very old, famous city in Poland.
So are those the two leading cities to go to? I mean, Warsaw and Krakow. Any other cities?
Well,
I mean, I know if we go on a tour, we have to follow their itinerary, but is there any other cities I should look for?
Well, don't forget there used to be a city called Lvov, Lemberg, which is in Russia now. You probably will not go to see it. That's in the eastern part of Poland. But of course, as you know, on business or otherwise, we went to some of the cities in western Poland that were formerly belonged to Germany. Now they're Polish. And they're very thriving industrialist cities, you know. We spent a I read political articles.
When you were what age?
8 or 10.
Like Peter.
And we had a lot of social upheavals, agrarian reform, this kind of reform, labor movement, all the factions of the labor movement. I could discuss everything with you. And the gymnasium, like high school. But I remember years before, my parents found a shade of them. They were just two, Stanley and myself.
And you were allowed to go to schools. I thought everyone was taught at home in those days. For kids to go to school, or even the Cheder. But I guess I was wrong.
You never did.
I said, they didn't arrange it. That's the way they decided. I was a year and a half or something older than you, and I belonged a little higher. I says, my Rebbe had a nice coat, and his had a rope around his waist. He didn't like his Rebbe because he has a rope around his waist. I said, but he's a good Rebbe, you know. It didn't work.
This is what age? You were 10?
Yes.
You say you were involved in the politics about the age of 8? So were you reading fluently? Was it Polish or Hebrew or what?
I read, every day I read 2 Polish papers and 1 Yiddish paper.
At the age of 8?
8, 9, 10.
Really? And did your parents encourage you with this, or in those days, I don't know.
Are you taping this?
Yeah.
Don't tape. I didn't need encouragement. I mean,
You just wanted it.
I did what I wanted to do.
You searched for it, yeah.
Did you get into any of the, as youth would do, radical movements? Because there had to be, because communism had started in 1918, 1917.
Oh, yes. So we had radical movements. First I joined the scout movement of Hirsch. It was a young people's scouts. There was Irish.
Yeah.
And then I joined some other things.
Do you remember when Paul went to war? I think he was in the army, wasn't he?
Yes, I remember.
Did he serve?
Eh?
Was he sent away to a front or something?
The way I remember it, I was awakened. Maybe I was 4 years old, or maybe I was awakened in the middle of the night. All the lights were on, and that told you we had a big complex. And they went through, that was conscription. They went through every house and they took away all the able-bodied men. They didn't have censors, they didn't have nothing. They just went in, looked for them, and took them out. And I remember in the middle, getting dressed and walking out in the middle of the night.
Well, you might have been,
Right?
you might have 10 years old.
The war started in 1914.
I know, but he was saying,
Huh? Was younger than that, 4 years.
So was he sent away? I mean, he wasn't with the family anymore? Really?
One day he just appeared, also in the middle of the night.
Really? All right. Now we will say good night because we're all tired. Thank you.